In this tutorial, we will explain how to create a task management app using Twidget. Let's first create a new page. We'll name it Task Manager and leave the rest of the settings as default. With our page created, we'll add a new 2-column element. We are planning to have our task adder on the left side and a list of tasks on the right. We will now add a form element to the left column. This form is where we will add information about our task to be added. Let's increase the size of the outer column container so we have more to work with. We'll remove the heading for the container as it's not needed. We'll now add a text input, a drop-down input, and a button to the container. We'll update the button label to Submit. Let's update both the labels for the text input and drop-down to Description and Status respectively. Now let's move on to the column which will contain the tasks. Let's add a list loop element. This element will loop over a variable and repeat the elements contained inside. We will want to loop through our tasks and show them all inside this container. Let's add a container element and remove the heading. We'll then add a text element and update the font size. This element will show the task description. Let's add another text element which will show the task status. We want to change the background color of the status, so let's add a container, remove the heading, and move the text status element inside it. We can now update the background color of the status. We'll increase the size of the text and update the width of the container. We'll now center the text element inside the container using the layout properties in the toolbar. Let's also add a margin to the top to add some space between the status and description elements. We'll clone the status element another 2 times and update the status text and colors. Now that we have our page elements set up, let's create our database table and API endpoints. Let's navigate to the database and create a new table called Tasks. We'll add 2 text fields, Description and Status. We'll now navigate to API and create an endpoint that will retrieve our stored tasks. We could generate this endpoint using the CRUD endpoint generator, but we'll create it from scratch. We'll add the database command, get multiple data, to this endpoint. We'll select the previously created tasks table in the command configuration and click Save. In the output, we'll select the variable returned from the command we just added. Let's now publish this endpoint. Let's navigate back to the API page and create another endpoint. This endpoint is a post endpoint and will be used to create a new task in the task table. We'll add an input to this endpoint which will allow us to send data from the page to the endpoint. We'll use a body input so we can pass through object data. We'll add this Save Data command to the endpoint and select the task table. We'll then select the input $body as the data we want to save in the table. Next, we'll add an output to the endpoint and select the variable returned from the Save Data command. Let's now publish this endpoint. We now have the 2 endpoints needed to store and retrieve tasks from our database. Let's now navigate to our page to link our elements with our newly created endpoints. We'll first create a new page variable called Tasks. This will be the list that all of our tasks are stored in. Next, we'll add a new function and call it getTasks. This function will call our getTasks API endpoint and store the result in the tasks page variable we just created. we'll first add the HTTP request command. We'll click Use Twidget endpoint so we can see the endpoints we have available to us. We'll click the get/tasks endpoint and save the command. We'll now add an update variable command. For the target variable, we'll select our page tasks variable. And for the value, we'll select the HTTP request response variables data field. That's all we need for the getTasks function. We'll now create the createTask function. We'll add an HTTP request command to the function and select the post/tasks endpoint. Since we want to send data, we'll update the data field to a form input. This form input will hold the values submitted from the form we created earlier. Next, we'll save the command. We'll now add a list add command to the function so we can add the newly created task to the tasks page variable. We'll select the tasks page variable as the list and select the HTTP request response variables data field as the new item. With both page functions created, we can now link them with our page elements. Let's exit the function view. We'll first update the field names of the text input and drop down to match the fields in our task table, description, and status respectively. We'll also update the drop-down options label and values to do, in progress, and complete. These are the three statuses we'll allow in the status field. Next, we'll add an action to the surrounding form element. This creates a submit action which will send the form element's values to the function chosen. We'll click on the create task function we created. We'll also need to update the button type from default to submit and select the form we want to submit when this button is pressed. We'll choose the surrounding form. Next, we want to retrieve the tasks from the database when the page is loaded. To do this, click on the main element which surrounds all elements and add an action. The main element can only have initial actions which run when the page is loaded. We'll select the getTasks action which will retrieve the tasks from the database and store the result in the page tasks variable. Now that we have the create task form set up, let's show the tasks in the right column. We'll first click on the list loop and select the page tasks variable as the data source. This will make all elements in the list loop element repeat corresponding to the amount of items in the task variable. We'll also update the item variable name to task to make it easier to use. Let's click on the text element and update the value to use the loop task object's description field by entering the variable surrounded by curly braces. Next, we want to only show the status element matching the status of the task. To do this, we'll update the visibility of the status and create an expression where the loop task status matches the element status text. We'll do the same for the other two statuses. Now that we have our page set up, let's preview it and test. Let's create a new task with a description and set the status as to do. When we submit the task, we can see the task element populate in the right column. We'll do this another 2 times to see all of the tasks in the column. Now, if we refresh the page, we can see all 3 elements are automatically populating the task column. In summary, we have successfully created a task management app using Twidget.